I'm Amber Heard, and I am here today to speak for a second, not as an actress, not as the actress you may have never heard of, but as the human, as the person who's aware slightly, awake slightly, but motivated greatly. I guess it started very early for me. I grew up on the border, the US-Mexican border in Texas, where I saw my dad work. He did manual labor alongside a labor force comprised almost entirely of migrants. And we had a lot of these migrants living with us. I considered them friends and family. I grew up on my dad's construction sites, bonding with them. You can imagine how bummed I was when I learned I didn't necessarily get entitled to a quinceañera. It was very disappointing. But I considered these people my friends and family, and we would take trips across the border often through my childhood. I think in my first interaction or my first recollection of the impact of injustice, unfairness, it hit me on those trips when I could drive across the border, and on the return trip back north across the border, it would land on me that I, by the accidental geography of my birth, could make that trip in both directions. And that why I, born by some accident, some fate, a few miles north of this line, soon to be a fence, why I had this privilege. My counterparts living a few miles south didn't have that privilege. And it struck me as inherently unfair. And I think even kids, especially kids, have a finely tuned sense of justice, finely tuned sense of what's fair. And something just didn't seem fair to me. So later I moved to Los Angeles, I started working, but the indelible mark left on me by those experiences and the experiences I accrued over a lifetime of that drove me to start working. I started going to the border on research missions with the ACLU. I worked in children's hospitals, specifically ones that I could translate at, and I later started taking trips to refugee camps through various nonprofits, and now with my work with the ACLU and the United Nations, I have found myself in a position where I am speaking on behalf of others who might not necessarily have that voice. I think it's important because simply put, if anyone's human rights are denied, everyone's human rights are undermined, and something I couldn't forget. But I'm scared now, to be quite honest. I am a white woman. I live in the 21st century. I live in the United States, so I already, won the lottery in so many ways, but I'm scared. I'm scared as I see increasingly polarized, nationalistic and popularist rhetoric flourishing. I see families separated, human rights abuses play out on the national stage without apology or accountability or retribution. I see children in cages. I see people elected to positions of power that blatantly deny and disregard the basic human rights of women, positions where they are less powerful. I watch them get elected. I watch the tone of the rhetoric change, and increasingly strong attitudes, whether they're in checkpoints or in the form of these, Supreme Court nominees. I see a lot of reasons why I should be scared. But there's hope. And what I'm seeing along with this is, I think, far more powerful. I'm seeing a groundswell of energy, of excitement, enthusiasm that has left a generation like mine used to a certain amount of luxury and expectation for that luxury, have left us somewhat apathetic and disengaged, and I have seen that all turn around lately, or especially lately, as I see a grassroots groundswell of galvanization. People like this, amazing young activist I met recently called Amanda Nguyen, who took an incredible tragedy that befell her and turned it into ammunition. And she was one of the individuals with whom I worked to gather more support through just grassroots efforts and this galvanization that I'm speaking of. And we capitalized off of this energy, and we walked into the Senate buildings hand in hand with survivors from the constituencies that were relevant, and we confronted the senators ourselves. We organized protests. We mounted, in my opinion, a successful campaign to push the narrative, to challenge the status quo, and to say that we're here, our voices will be heard, and change, like revolution, does not happen overnight. Protests and revolution share this in common. Their result is not in a vote or a law, it is in a change of attitude, and we are seeing that happen. So to leave you on a slightly more positive note, I think it is a great time for us. I think everybody here, if you believe in human rights, you are a human rights activist. Change starts at home. If you believe in this, stand up. Be the leader that you are looking for. Now's the time. Thank you.